It's taken me quite some time to decide whether to tell anyone about this. With Mardi Gras coming up again soon, I wanted to make sure people were warned and know what happened. Something happened at Mardi Gras last year, and it's being covered up. My friends and I decided to go to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. I've always heard that the city was a non-stop 24-hour year-round party. I've also heard that the days leading up to Mardi Gras take this to the extreme. There were 3 of us all together, myself, Chris, and Sam. We decided to arrive 3 days early and build up to the actual day of Mardi Gras. We drove down, taking turns at the wheel so we wouldn't have to stop at any hotels along the way. The first night, Saturday was our first night there. We are from New Jersey, where it was about 30 degrees Fahrenheit when we left. But when we arrived in New Orleans, it was in the 80s and very humid. Our hotel was right on the Mississippi River and our room had a waterfront view. We settled in, cleaned up, and went out to walk around and check things out. We slowly aimed ourselves towards the French Quarter, checking out as much as we could along the way. I was a bit shocked that we could just buy beer from vendors right on the street and walk around unbothered by police. We can't do that in Jersey. All in all, we had a great time, great food and drink, and retired to the hotel around 4 a.m. while the city was still buzzing. As tired as I was, it took a while to fall asleep due to the loud people partying in the hallway and surrounding rooms. The second night, Sunday, we went to check out Harrah's, the casino, and then we made it back out to the streets for the atmosphere and alcohol once again. While walking around, we met a girl named Antoinette, Tony for short, who told us that she was a local and that she was going to college there. Tony suggested we all go to a little restaurant just slightly out of the area called Le Bateau, that translates to the good times in English. We all headed down together, and it was a pretty cool little place. While we were there, I witnessed something that I had previously thought was only done in sitcoms. In the middle of our dinner, the door to the kitchen flew open, slamming against the wall. Out from the kitchen walked a large man, using one hand to carry a smaller employee by the back of his shirt collar. The guy being carried looked like there was something wrong with him. His eyes were half closed and bloodshot, while his face was almost pure white, completely void of expression. The larger man carried him by the back of his shirt all the way across the restaurant to the front door, where he pushed him outside and shut the door behind him. On his way back to the kitchen, the large man said, "Sorry folks, but you just can't show up to work stoned out of your gourd like that." We all drank quite a bit that night, and I ended up staying at Antoinette's place, about a mile away. Chris and Sam said they were going to stay out for a while longer and then go back to the hotel. The third night. The next day, Monday, I texted my friends that I'd meet up with them later that evening. I spent the day with Antoinette and we had a great time. I started wondering if this was too much for me to be getting into, allowing myself to get involved with a girl like this when I live so far away. She was definitely someone who I would want to pursue a relationship with, but I knew I'd be leaving town without her in just a few days. I decided to push these thoughts away and let the proverbial chips fall where they may. We had 2 more days. Anything could happen. While Tony and I were walking back downtown later, I noticed there was a girl walking about a block behind us who seemed to be pretty out of it. I couldn't tell if she was drunk, high, or what. Tony told me to just ignore her, and she hurried me along. Once we got to the corner where we were meeting up with Chris and Sam, things began to get strange. As we were crossing the street, I felt a hand on my back, almost like someone was pushing me. Although rather weakly, I turned around and realized that it was the girl who was walking a block behind us earlier. She wasn't actually pushing me though. It appeared that she needed to hold on to something to avoid falling over. We stopped and asked if she was okay, She just sort of grunted. At this point, I think we all became concerned. She started mumbling a bit, saying things like, "My name is Emily. I was with friends, but now I'm here, and I live here, that way," pointing in a direction that was blocked by a parade route. I asked her, "What happened? Did you lose your friends?" To which she did not reply. We were standing right in front of a Burger King. I asked the crowd if someone could get a cup of water for her. Everyone who heard me just looked the other way and kept walking, some giving me the evil eye as if I had done something wrong. A BK employee near the door said, "You get her out of here, now!" Slamming the door shut. I noticed that Tony was staring at Emily with a very serious look on her face. Tony whispered into my ear, "She isn't drunk. We should get out of here." I replied, "But shouldn't we help her? She's really messed up. We can't leave her here to die." Tony begrudgingly said, "All right, but let's make this quick." We each got on one side and carried Emily along with us down the block, where we came across a security guard standing in front of a parking structure. I stopped and asked the guard if they could help. I explained that we didn't know what was wrong with her, but that she needed attention and possibly a ride to the hospital. The guard looked at me like I was stupid. Tony gave her a shrug. The guard then refocused on Emily. She reached into Emily's backpack, rifled around a bit, and pulled out an ID card. The guard then said, "I'll take care of this and get her an ambulance. You go on your way." Tony started pulling me along as I said, "Thank you," to the guard. As we were all walking, I asked Antoinette, "What did you mean when you said she wasn't drunk? Is there something going on that we don't know about?" Tony just said, "There's a lot of strange things going on around here that you don't want to know about, and neither do I." My friends kind of laughed and we moved along. We had some drinks and got back into the celebratory mood. Chris mentioned that he had been wanting to check out one of the New Orleans cemeteries that he had read about. Tony did not look enthused, but Chris was already in motion. He walked over to one of the police officers who was standing guard and asked, "Hey, do you know where the closest cemetery is?" The officer looked at him dead in the eye and stared for a few seconds. Then, and no, this is not a joke, even though it sounds like a bad slasher movie line, he said, "There's one just a few blocks over that way, but you don't want to be going down there." Chris smirked. "Why not?" The officer replied, and again, he really said this. It's not just a cheesy line from a horror movie. They don't really like your kind over there. I have to be honest, I was kind of freaked out by this interaction, and Tony wasn't looking happy. Chris said, "Come on, nothing's going to happen. This isn't a horror movie." After a long sigh, I replied, "I guess it can't hurt. I've heard that the cemeteries are a sight to see around here." We embarked on Chris's request, much to the chagrin of the rest of the group. There was quite a change in the look of the city as we got closer to the cemetery. It went from historic New Orleans chic to something much less visually appealing. As we drew closer, I started to see and feel eyes on all of us. As we walked the final stretch to the cemetery entrance, there were at least a dozen people standing on their front porches and in their front yards, looking at us like we were about to do something really stupid. "We shouldn't be here," Tony said quietly. "Well, we are here, so let's just be quick about it," I said. When we got to the front gate, it was locked. Apparently, visiting hours were over. "Oh no, I guess we have to leave. Too bad," said Tony. Despite our misfortune, we could still see all of the large, creepy and wonderful burial structures throughout the wrought iron fencing. Because New Orleans is below sea level, bodies are buried above ground. The arrangement of the structures in the cemetery actually looked like a small city, a city of the dead. The eyes were now piercing the backs of our heads, and we knew something was going to happen if we didn't get out soon. But Chris started walking the perimeter of the fencing until he happened upon a crevice big enough for him to try and squeeze through. He told us to follow him. I was hesitant, and Tony was telling me that we need to leave, but I figured a quick adventure inside couldn't hurt. We'd be gone in a few minutes, not even enough time for police to arrive and catch us. So we all squeezed through, one by one. It was getting pretty dark now, and this was really starting to feel wrong. I was just waiting for the doors to start opening and the dead to come out and greet us. I decided I was done with this place and said to Chris, "Alright, we're going back. This is just disrespectful, and the locals obviously don't want us here." He shot back, "Scared, huh?" I ignored him. We all squeezed back out, one at a time. Tony went just before me, and I was the last one out. I had a feeling like someone else was behind me, even though I was the last one. Before going through, I looked behind me, and I could swear that in the darkness, the door on one of the structures looked like it was sliding open. I couldn't even hear the faint sound of a cement block scraping across the ground. I'm sure it was just my imagination, but this made me decide to get the heck out of there with the quickness. We walked silently at a much quicker pace back to the more populated downtown area. The noise and lights in the French Quarter seemed to welcome us home. Tuesday, Mardi Gras, Carnival, a farewell to the flesh. Today, the streets were twice as crowded as they had been the night before. This was the big day. Tons of new tourists filled the streets, to the point that we literally couldn't even walk on Bourbon Street. We attempted to, but got stuck in the crowd like someone had tried to fit 100 crayons into a box that was only meant for 50. If anything happened here, we simply wouldn't be able to move or get out of the way. For the rest of the day, we stuck to the side streets. As the parades carried on, it became more and more difficult to even go anywhere else, as they were blocking the streets, and thus blocking any way for us to go in the direction that we wanted. At this point, we kind of gave up and decided, if we can't beat them, we join them. "Let's just go watch one of the parades," I said. The others were indifferent. We all grabbed drinks and walked towards one of the main streets of the city as nightfall was beginning to close in on us. On our walk, we came upon some sort of dance troupe in the street. There were probably a dozen people in the troupe, all dressed in dark red, tribal-looking outfits. Along with their dance, a few played hand drums, and they were all singing in what may have been French. I couldn't understand what they were saying though. At some point, the woman in front, who appeared to be the leader of the troupe, caught my eye and stared with a look as if she was not happy to see me. I saw her look over at Antoinette, then avert her gaze as if she had been caught. "Let's go," said Tony. As we walked away, I looked back and saw that the woman was staring again with the same unhappy look on her face. A few minutes later into our walk, we started to see ahead down the street where it was looking more and more congested with people, to the point of it looking like the main floor of a sold-out rock show. I wondered how these people could deal with being so compressed together. Tony spoke up. "We want to stay away from anything that crowded," she said. The rest of us agreed. I said, "Well, let's just get a little closer. We don't have to get right in the pit, but I do want to see what's so exciting over there." We kept walking. As we got closer, something started to seem a bit more clear. Not all of the people were making noise because they were having fun. Some of the merry-making noises turned out to be screams. As we moved closer, despite Antoinette's objections, I noticed a small huddle of people in the center. Someone was on the ground. I hurried up to the circle and pushed my way to the inside. What I saw there left me frozen in my tracks. There were two people. One was laying on their back, motionless. The other was on their knees, hovering over one on the ground, and it looked like they were eating their face. Blood was spewing everywhere while Gawker screamed in terror. Tony grabbed my arm from behind and said, "I told you, we have to go." She pulled at my arm, but I couldn't avert my gaze from what was happening. Eventually, she pulled hard enough that I lost balance, sort of fell over, then got back up and started retreating with her. When we got back outside of the circle, we saw that there was another of the exact same scene happening maybe 20 feet away from us in another direction. "What is happening?" I screamed. Then, the first circle we saw was dispersing rapidly as the flesh eater abandoned their meal and started seeking dessert in the crowd. Just like that, another was incapacitated on the ground, becoming seconds. But there was something else that I noticed while the thing was rising to look for its next victim. It was Emily, the girl who followed us the previous night. Tony told us that we were going to need to get to her place. As we began running, there were more and more of these things attacking and eating others. Where were they all coming from? If it wasn't horrifying enough, I then received the answer to my question. Some of the flesh eaters were missing faces themselves. Just bone, blood, and remnants of skin where their faces used to be. And they were using these skeletal faces to eat those of others. They weren't coming from anywhere. They were being created by the other flesh eaters. As one walked away from their meal, I saw the body of their victim rise and begin chasing their own mark. I was transfixed on this horrific spontaneous public meltdown of society happening right before our eyes. When I was suddenly thrust to the ground with great force, I never saw it coming. I had no idea what was happening. I eventually focused and realized that I had one of these faceless flesh eaters hovering over me. Blood was dripping from their jowls onto my face. I knew it was all over for me. Before I could even scream, Antoinette suddenly appeared face to face with the creature hovering over me. Except she looked different. Her eyes were blood red, and she appeared to have a large set of fang-like teeth protruding from her open mouth. She used one hand to pick up the creature, bringing it face to face with her. She stared directly into its eyes and let out a guttural, terrifying sound like I've ever heard. Whatever this was, the creature was afraid of Tony. She dropped it, and it scrambled off immediately. She looked at me with her new face and shouted, "Get up and follow me. They won't touch you now." We ran behind her the rest of the way, tears in my eyes as I tried to figure out what was happening. When we got to her place, Tony locked the doors and then shook some sort of liquid out of a bottle onto the floor in front of each of the doorways and windows. "This won't be over until morning," she said. Her face was back to normal now. We all stayed together in the living room that night. I knew that Tony would keep us safe. When daylight broke, she alerted us that it should be safe now, but that we needed to leave the city and go home immediately. We piled into her car so that she could drive us back to ours at the hotel. As we drove, I noticed that the streets were now empty, save for what appeared to be cleanup crews picking up the aftermath. Some were power washing the ground where there appeared to be dark stains. There were no bodies and no flesh eaters out seeking breakfast from what I could see. We were all dead silent for the entire drive, focused on what was happening outside our windows. Tony turned on the radio to a news station, and they were reporting that several people had died in what they called parade float accidents the prior day. As Tony said goodbye to us, she hugged me and put a note in my pocket. I haven't had the courage to read it yet.